We do custom work, and can run anywhere between 8 and 10,000 acres in a year doing custom work. And if any one of you maybe saw their equipment go by, or our grain elevators, you might say, well, that is a big bad farm, and that's what the problem is. That's what I want to talk about today as well. But that's where I started, right? Was this conservative community. I went off to York University and became quite a left-leaning individual at a university, and then went on to like South Africa, South Korea, India. I mean, I volunteered on Vandana Shiva's farm, and came all the way back here to do my master's at the University of Guelph, and I studied sociology. And since then, I started working for the Maitland Valley Conservation Authority, and then worked for Farm and Food Care, and then for Soil and Crop. And I realized I could just never stay faithful to just one job. So I became a freelancer and a consultant. And so now the work that I get to do is all over the map, because I'm not really specializing in one thing or staying with one institution or one job. At first I thought that was a bad thing, but now I see the advantage of all the different perspectives that I get to work with. So yeah, I'm all over the map as a freelancer. So I wanted to, I'm going to talk about 3 projects today, and kind of to situate them. Where I started was kind of the end goal, right? I worked with the Conservation Authority, where we're trying to get farmers to. And so I want to talk a little bit about the Huron View controlled drainage site that I worked on. And I also want to talk about where we are, and then also the path. How do we get there? So there's 3 projects that I'm kind of working on, but I wanted to reflect on, like, when I was starting off, I worked with innovative farmers, with the Conservation Authority, and I was just trying to get farmers to grow more cover crops, use less tillage. We're trying to improve soil health, to improve water quality. And I would be on committees, but I would get almost defensive when people would say, but that's not how things are. Because the way that I was seeing the world is how it could be. And I think it's just so important that we have people from all the different parts of the map, and all different organizations that are coming from different perspectives at the table, and to not get defensive when we hear other views other than our own, because it is quite arrogant to think that the way that we see the world is the way that the world actually is, right? We're just seeing one perspective on it. So that's why it's important. So anyways, I started with innovative farmers and with Soil and Crop, and promoting all these BMPs. The coolest project that I got to work on in the last 2 years, and I'd love to hear if you've heard about it. I would love to have questions about and have a conversation about it. But obviously drainage is a hot topic. Is it contributing to phosphorus in the lakes? And can we just turn off drainage? Wouldn't that be great? And you can, if it's on flat ground. Those tiles under the ground can't have more than like a 0.1% slope. If you put a control gate and a control structure at the end of that tile, it'll blow the tile if it has any slope on it. So it's fine in Essex to put controlled drainage in. But what we wondered is, can you put controlled drainage on a slope if you change the way that you installed the laterals? And so this picture here, you can see, this is a 0.1% grade. Starting here, this is basically following the topography of this field, snakes all the way around, and then comes to the control gate. I hope you can see my mouse, because that's what I'm following one. And then you put a control gate at the end of that lateral. So there's 22 control gates all along this slope. It's like up to a 9% slope. Some would say you shouldn't even be farming it. It had a lot of springs that would come out as it was coming down the slope. It's right on the Bayfield River, and this is right south of Clinton. So speaking of like working with different perspectives, it was amazing because we had the county, this is the county's land. It was Soil and Crop Improvement Association is farming it. then the Sauble Bayfield Conservation Authority bankrolled the whole thing with the CAP project, and LICO, the land improvement contractor, so those were the drainage contractors, they contributed to it, and they only wanted to be a part of this collaboration if Ducks Unlimited were there. So we got Ducks on board too. And I thought this was the most unlikely group of organizations to pull off a project like this. But it was installed in June of 2019. And we're still doing just the monitoring of the water flow and concentrations now as the control gates are open. They're not actually being used. They weren't actually used the last year. So if anyone, like, I'd want to just pause here and talk just about this controlled drainage site if anyone has questions. Unfortunately, I don't have any numbers. As you can well imagine, you can't give an answer to a question like this in 1 year. Are definitely learning a lot about drainage and yeah, the coefficients. There's more water leaving through the tile drains than ever came onto the field, so we know that we're intercepting a lot of spring water. Does anyone have any questions?
I don't see any questions in the chat box, but if others do have questions, you can also unmute yourself and just ask orally.
I'm going to move on.
Hi, Mel. It's Karen Maskant here.
Hi, Karen. Yes.
How are you doing? I talked to Mary Valise about, she's so excited about this project. It's
right.
And
yes.
I was just curious if it's at the point where other farmers are starting to adopt some of this, or is it still purely experimental right now?
That is a great question. And it is purely experimental. Like, we did a great survey over the winter, which we really looked at, okay, what would be the barriers to putting drainage in like this? It really costs only 15% more to put in the laterals on contour. The control gates are the prohibitive kind of cost. They cost between $500 and $900 a piece probably. And so they're curious. I would say farmers are curious. They really want to know, did it improve yields? Can you do subsurface irrigation through that? That would be their most motivating factor. One is improving water quality, because they do really care. At least the farmers that I talk to sure care a lot about how the public is perceiving them, and they want to do a good job. So water quality they care about, and then also, can that actually be used for subsurface irrigation to improve yields? So then I have had a call from a farmer or two that are interested in doing this kind of drainage. But the thing is, if you've already installed a conventional system, you can't just easily retrofit them with a control gate. So this is good for people that are just starting to tile now. It's something to think about. So, but they're kind of just waiting to see before they would make an investment like that. How I'm recommending farmers is they put it out in contour and then wait and see our results, and then they maybe can retrofit them with control gates after that. Any other questions? Sorry, I can ramble forever. So there will be a report. I'll put it up. I'll put the website on at the end of this presentation, but there's going to be a report that we're launching in the next few weeks. It, again, doesn't have the water quality data that you'd be wanting, but definitely has some of the other things that farmers want to know.
Hey, Mel. It's Natalie. I just have a quick question. Have you had any, have you had any response from the local community when they walk by, or is there signage, or
yes.
Not walk by, but, you know, drive?
Yep. No,
yeah,
they can walk by. It's perfect. We've got, it's public field. Anyone can visit at any time. There's a parking lot right next to it. It's right behind the Huron View Health Unit. And yeah, no, the public, farmers want this to be like a demo site to say, hey, we care about the environment. We've went to great lengths to try to research this issue. And yeah, they definitely want to do the outreach to the public. And it is totally accessible. So come check it out.
Have you heard any feedback? Do people think it's
no,
like
just that they're
guys...
interested. A lot of the elderly people from there's a retirement community in the area, so they like taking the strolls. We've heard positive feedback from them, but yeah, no, that's nothing yet so far.
Thanks.
We'll have that meeting soon, Natalie. So next, I want to move on to like how things are. Like it's fine and all good to live in the way that things could be, but if we don't really understand the way things are, then we're kind of get stuck in that perspective too. And this is a phenomenal project that I got to work on with Christopher Wellen. He started at Windsor and then moved to Ryerson during the project, so it's kind of a joint between both universities. It is built on the multi-watershed nutrient study put on by the MOECC or MACP, whatever. These are the 11 selected watersheds. And what I did was just knock on every single door of every single farm in all of those watersheds and try to find out how they were farming. Because we can get the water quality data, but if we don't know what happened on the ground, it's hard to kind of correlate. So this is all going into a model. And the report's going to be available for all of you that do modeling to get the results of these, and hopefully they can help make it more accurate. This is real data. So I talked to 200 farmers, collected 4,200 soil tests, and 46,000 acres were surveyed. So that's about 50% of each of those watersheds is part of this. And I'm going to share draft data with you. You can take screenshots of this, but please don't put them around because we are still kind of verifying this. But because most of you just care about phosphorus, I'm sure. This is just looking at phosphorus and the 4R approach. This is the average rate of the average season of the average placement of either a fertilizer or manure across all 11 watersheds. So you get a sense here of, again, like what you might kind of just assume, but now we've got better data that, a lot of this phosphorus is going on in the spring, either incorporated or injected. And if it's going on as manure, it's more often in the late summer or the fall, but that most of it is incorporated. So we really got a good sense of, even if farmers hadn't heard about the 4Rs, because I definitely asked all of the 200 farmers if they'd heard of the 4Rs, and I'd say about 50% had heard of them, but I'd say 80% of them are doing it. Like they definitely are using pretty good practices. It definitely changes whether you're doing corn, soybeans, or wheat. So this is just taking those 11 watersheds by crop. If you can see here that these first two bars are the corn, where that has the highest amount of phosphorus going on it, and nitrogen, but we're just looking again at phosphorus. And this is a breakdown. I made them green if it was in the spring, blue-ish if they're in the summer, and then more of the yellowish is if it's in the fall. So this just gives a sense again of the rate and how it goes down and how it's different between each crop. So soybeans you can see, and wheat, there's hardly any manure going on soybeans or wheat. But then it gets even more interesting if we start looking by watershed, because they're so different from each other. So I'm only going to talk about 3 right now. Larches is in Elmira, or outside of Elmira. It's a loam soil, but this is a high Mennonite Amish area. 5% of those farms are rented. The average farm size, like a farmer, is 116 acres. Versus Big Creek, right in those clay plains just north of Leamington, 44% of that land that we surveyed was rented, and the average farm size is, up to 1,200 acres. And the same would be true in Little Lesable. So that is, Big Creek has like virtually no livestock. Like there was 1 or 2 farmers that we talked to that had some animals. But when we talk about the Maumee, this is the most comparable watershed to the Maumee research that's been done, and other parts of that watershed. So Little Lesable is like big cash croppers and got some big livestock operations. These are big farms. Again, the average farm size is about 1,200 acres and about 38% of it is rented. So if we just look at these three watersheds in comparison, this is again, the total phosphorus and when it would be applied. If you look at Larches, again, this is the Mennonite watershed, there's hardly any fertilizer going down compared to the manure that's going down. And when it goes down, it's in the fall, primarily in the fall or in the summer. Versus Big Creek, where they have the inverse, where they're using like hardly any manure and mainly fertilizer, but they're not growing a lot of corn. And so they're using like a lot less fertilizer. Both of those, there's two watersheds that hardly were growing any corn and they have the lowest rates of phosphorus being applied. And then Little Ausable, yeah, to me, Little Ausable is the most normal, at least to where I am. Tom, yes, please.
I'm
just waiting. Here. I was like baiting you to ask a question.
I'm glad you still have this figure up. You've got pounds per acre here. I'm trying to get my head around this because you've got different timing shown in the colors there as well. Yep. The pounds per acre, is that per field basis or is that acre of the watershed?
Yes, this is like a dirty number really, and we can do a lot better fine analysis of this. But if I took like all the phosphorus that was applied and then divided it by, like we area weighted it, and then divided by all the acres that we surveyed, this is, and then like by every timing that it would have had, this is what would go into a model as like the average phosphorus timing. If you multiplied this by the whole watershed, that would be the watershed numbers. Did that answer your question?
I think I've got it, because I think you know, you're basically taking the manure and spreading it over all the cropland acres of the watershed.
Yes.
And then
and if I took it back, this is just 1 acre.
Right. Because but a typical single application may certainly have rates higher than 50 pounds an acre. Right. Okay. Thank you.
Yes. No, exactly. This would always, if there's 50%, like Little Ausable, probably 50% of the acres never ever get manure. And so I just used that as a 0 and made that part of the average. So if they are using manure, they're using double or triple. But this is like, the quick and dirty number.
Okay.
It's
really, if I might.
Yes, please.
A quick question. So in that case, do you know with your farmers how many of them apply manure on their land and how many of them don't?
Oh, yes.
Okay.
We know so many things. Let me show you. This is just the intensity of tile drainage. Again, for the percentage of the watershed that was surveyed, the darkest blue has under 30-foot spacing. There's other ones that have virtually no tile drainage whatsoever, like around Smithville, that clay plain, it's hardly drained at all. These are the crops. You can see in Larches, they have a lot of livestock, obviously, that's what makes manure. And so they have a lot of hay for their livestock. And so they've got this green is hay, where you can see it's hardly grown in other watersheds. And then Big Creek, they're just growing a lot of soybeans because that's what you grow on clay. And and Little Ausable, they have the highest proportion of edible beans because they are a stone's throw away from Hensel, which is where all of the edible beans and identity preserved soybeans kind of have that market. So there's an answer to all these questions of like, why is it like this? There's a really good reason why farmers farm the way that they do. And yeah, so tillage rotation, this is just the intensity of plowing. We covered a 5-year window, like we asked them about 5 years. So we got a sense of what their crop rotation was, not just what it was in one specific year, but the rotational answers. So this is the percent of acres that are plowed. So every year, 5 times out of 5, that would be the darkest at the very top. And then it just kind of goes down in intensity. So you can see in Big Creek on this clay, they are not putting a plow in there, very rarely. So I love this one. Is to me the most Well, and you would know better, but a very critical time is what color is the field on April 1st, or in the middle of March, what is the quality of that field? Does it have golden residue on it? Does it, or is it fully brown, like fully plowed, or does it have green living crop on it? And that would kind of demonstrate what that spring freshet, like kind of an impact that it could have had on that watershed. And this is, yeah, all the numbers that we pulled together into just this, a simple, was it green, gold, or brown on April 1st? So this gives a good sense. Again, with the larches, like the Mennonite watershed, they have a lot of hay, and they have a lot of tillage. So it's kind of one or the other, versus Big Creek, where they're not doing as much tillage because you can't, because it's clay. They've got a lot more residue. So again, really good reasons for everything. This, everybody wants to know. And Tom, I love the new data, that the soil test data that came out across Ontario. I actually should have put it in there to compare against, but it's definitely comparable. This is just the range of the soil tests, and you can see kind of what range they fell in. This is kind of the optimal range of where farmers should be, but you can see Big Creek has like super low levels of phosphorus in their soil versus Larches, which just gets a little bit high with all that manure. So very variable.
And Mel, I have a question. Can you leave that one up again?
Yes, of course.
Oh, thank you. Clearly, different distributions of soil test phosphorus. The key and very important question is, how do the farmers in those watersheds feel about you sharing this data? Because this is a pretty small spatial scale, right?
Yes. We told them that we would only be sharing it on the watershed level. And
which is this watershed, which is fine, but it's a pretty, Essex County farmers now say, hey, yeah, we don't have a problem. It's those guys over there, right? The people in Larches.
You already think that
because there's the issues of okay, are we going to be singled out now for penalties, or are they only going to qualify for government cost share programs?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I want to report this back to them so that they can see how they are against other watersheds. I want this to inform models, because I would rather us have the truth. And I don't want to shy away from the truth, but yeah, I think that we need to handle it with a little bit of a story behind it too, right? Like there is a reason why the phosphorus rates are high, and it's because they have so much manure. And the reason they have manure is because you make money with supply management. You have small herds. There's a whole system and there's a whole reason behind this. But yeah, I hear you. We need to be sensitive of how we share this, especially like this.
Are you willing to share these slides? Because I'm working on another project to go to a smaller spatial scale for the whole province, and this may be helpful in persuading others to participate.
Yeah.
So Mel, it's Louise here. I have a question for you. I'm just curious if you could remind me how many participants you surveyed in each of these 3 watersheds that this information is based on?
Ooh, now I need to remember. There would have been 35 in Larches. I think I got 15 or 20 in Big, and same in Little Asable.
Okay.
But I got, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, and it was 5 years of cropping. And so what years were those?
2015, or 15, 16, 17, 18, 19. Yeah. And these soil tests were taken throughout the project. So they kind of came from, if they already had them, then we just took them and paid them for their soil tests, or we soil tested for them throughout the project. And that's how we got these numbers. We do have them kind of like spatially located, which we definitely can't share, Tom, but we're fine with sharing it at this level.
Okay.
Yeah. The last is, we popped this into the Plato model. We didn't share it with OMAFRA. OMAFRA shared the model with us, and we plopped in 5,000 data points to validate Plato, but really could see, I don't know, I just put this out for discussion. To me, this is like, wow, Little Asable's doing great. Do we need to look at Plato again? Or, it definitely shows some variability, but I just wanted to pop this out here. Again, this is all in draft form, and it's to provoke conversation.
So Mel, this takes into account both the soil test distribution and the landscape contours, and then also the management practices that you've...
Yeah. Plato is super, Plato doesn't involve cover crops, but yeah, it's looking at the USLE, the slope, soil type, and all the existing soil tests, the management, what type of crop it was, and what type of tillage. But yeah, it didn't get into cover crops and a few other things that I would have liked to see in it. Pam?
So do you have any data to compare to in terms of what are the phosphorus levels in the rivers and relative to where we want them to be?
That's what we'll be able to answer. Like the multi-watershed nutrient study, the MECP has the water quality data for all of these watersheds for the same 5 years that we studied them. So now is the test is, let's see if the model makes sense in real life. Yeah. It's complicated. Why is it so complicated, Pam?
It's nature.
Yeah.
Biology and physics and chemistry. I'm wondering which version of Plato you had access to, because I think cover crops are included, at least in the erosion part.
Oh, yes. Yeah.
So I think if you have cover crops, the erosion particulate part is captured, but they weren't sure yet how to include soluble reactive phosphorus. So with cover crops. I guess, I think I'm looking forward to seeing Chris's modeling with kind of this, again, it's sort of regional, right? So you have this nice range of watersheds. I guess the challenge of interpreting, I guess I was thinking back with some of the other slides too, like number of participants versus number of acres, or number of tests versus the number of acres, and just, you know, do you run, I guess always bring it back to the there's this balance between biophysical and sort of adoption type questions. And so I guess in this first stab at things, you're kind of looking at both those, sort of the people side and sort of the acreage coverage side.
Yeah. Yeah, there's a lot we can know about the watershed from not talking to farmers. Like I didn't ask them questions about whether they had a windbreak or not, or a grassed waterway, because I can see that from an aerial photo. We didn't ask them a lot about their soil test, their soil type. We only asked them what we couldn't see from the air or couldn't find out any other way. We've also done like windshield surveys. We compared them with windshield surveys that conservation authorities had done to try to kind of like extrapolate, because we got 50%, at least 50% of each of these watersheds. I think I got 75% of each of these watersheds. Like I talked to all those farmers. And then when it got to lower, I hesitate to share any of those results.
Yeah, and I guess that's just sort of my last question is when you're showing this information, then is it just of the 50% or just of what is surveyed, or have you sort of made an interpretation for the whole watershed?
Yeah, no, I'm more comfortable talking just about the acres that we surveyed, but eventually, and for the model, they're going to have to kind of make assumptions.
The water quality part, yeah.
Okay. But also if we got a good sense of how corn is grown in a certain area, then we can start extrapolating, at least we know that it was corn, because we can just look at AFC crop layer, and then get a sense of how we can interpret the rest of the watershed that we didn't get to.
Interesting. Thanks.
Mel,
Yeah.
can I ask one question? Karen Maskant here. Some of these watersheds had historic, like Blue Arc era work done.
Yes.
And was there any look at how things changed within a watershed over time as far as practices, livestock numbers, all of that?
Yes. This was a good teaser because it's got, yes, we definitely, majority of them were Blue Arc watersheds, and we do have that data, and it is fascinating how much things have changed since then. And yeah, that'll be part of the report, is kind of modeling how things have changed over time.
Water quality as well changed?
Yes, 100%. Yeah, water quality and how the farming has changed.
Okay, great, thanks.
Yeah, and I can't speak to the water quality, but from the farming, it's night and day. Very interesting.
That'll be interesting to see.
Yeah. The next slide is the third part of the presentation, so I'll keep pausing here. Does anyone have a few more questions about?
Yeah, this is Jian Liu. I have another question. So when you use the Plato model to do this analysis, does it distinguish surface runoff or leaching? Like when you assess the risk of phosphorus losses?
Yeah, well, I can't speak too much to Plato. Probably someone else on this call could speak more to Plato than I can. All we got was the whole back end of how AgriSuite would work if you typed it in. There are two versions as well. We worked with Alex Berry to get the one that they liked the most, and this is the result of the one they liked the most. There are different breakpoints and all that, but I'm still not answering your question. It really is just looking at what OMAFRA put in that model.
Okay, I'm just wondering if you want to relate soil test phosphorus to the leaching results. I mean, the same level of soil test can mean different things for surface runoff or leaching.
Tom's just sent the link there to the Plato model, and
okay, perfect.
It is surface and tile.
Yeah.
Leaching of phosphorus isn't a huge concern in Ontario.
Okay.
So, but it is tile, so some of that subsurface flow he's wondering about. But
okay,
the link
gotcha.
Give
now, quick question about the farmers that you looked at, that you talked to. So you said at the start that there was like 48% or some number that was rented out versus, so was there any bias in who you talked to and whether they were owners or renters? And did that
yes, that's a good question. Yeah. If we would, yes, those numbers came from just the people that we talked to. But my assumption is that they're even higher. The reason that we didn't get to talk to the other people is that they don't live there. They were actually much further afield, like they lived quite a ways away, and I just couldn't get to them. So yeah, I think that's a minimum of, but when we say that 35% of Ontario farmland is rented, I was just demonstrating that that's variable. And there's Mennonite areas are not rented out very much. But yeah, area like Big Creek, Leamington area, yeah, there was this tiny little houses with huge properties that they just rented out. And everyone kind of worked in the cities. So the kind of the proximity to cities and other jobs would kind of, yeah. Anyways, I'm getting ahead of myself, but yeah, we talked to the people that were home, and I went back sometimes 3 times, and got as much as we could. Not everyone said yeah, but it definitely helped that we compensated them for their soil tests. So we were paying all these farmers. Everyone got paid to participate in this study.
I had one question. Sorry to keep bugging you.
Oh, no,
questions.
Please.
So this is based on prior experience that I've had. Was there any, so you talked primarily of phosphorus, was there any concerns with wells that they might have in their property or drinking water or nitrate issues?
Yeah, I didn't get into that. Like, I wish I had. I wish like I could have taken a whole day with each of them. But as it was, like I tried to cram these surveys into an hour and a half. But yeah, they definitely would wish we'd talked about that too.
That's good. Thanks so much. Okay. I don't see any other questions. Do you want to?
And I want to talk about the soil network.
Yes.
Thank you. Thanks everyone for the discussion. It makes it a lot more interesting for everyone to have a discussion. So the last, and I do want to say that doing that project was so phenomenal for me to get out of my perspective. Because again, I was coming from the, like, you got to use cover crops perspective. And then just talking to 200 farmers, many of whom I'd never met before. I'd never seen at a meeting. They would never go to a meeting. That really helped me understand that until we know where people are right now, there's no way of kind of figuring out that point, the place between the map of how to get where we're going. So I really appreciated that. And I wish my hunch and my feeling, and when I talked to those 200 farmers, as the more connected people were, the more they were using BMPs. Like socially connected in their community. It could have just been like with 4-H or Rotary Club or something like that. But the more connected people were using best management practices. And the soil network is based on social research kind of like that. Like, well, can we impact people's social connections? If we can improve the amount of social capital that a person has, can we improve the environmental outcomes? Is kind of the question that drove me to working to create the Ontario Soil Network. So the Ontario Soil Network is taking innovators into influencers and expanding their network in the hope that farmers are the messengers of BMPs. Because like no one has had an aha moment from reading a fact sheet or having the Conservation Authority come on their land and tell them they should use cover crops. And they're like, oh, sure, right? Like we really need to look at who's the messenger, and we're helping farmers be the messenger. So we're using community-based social marketing, the idea of social normative messaging, that like we've always done this is what normal people do kind of messaging. We're definitely looking at the diffusion of innovations, getting the innovators to talk to the early adopters, to talk to the early majority. This naturally happens. Well, or sometimes it doesn't happen at all, depending on the nature of the innovation as to how it diffuses. We can talk about that later, but in general, that was the idea: can we actually fuel that? Like what would have happened naturally? That curve and the connections that kind of just already exist on Twitter, like in social media, the farmers already have a network. Can we fuel that network? And we're using the principles of adult education, which is like, I don't think even children probably, or your students don't even learn in a classroom. Farmers sure don't learn in a classroom, right? So, but a lot of our extension was the Southwest Ag Conference or Farm Smart is all just like herd farmers into your classroom and hope that they learn something. Farmers learn from each other. It's tacit knowledge that is kind of only shared through experience and through discussion. So that's kind of the idea behind the soil network. But how we operationalize it is we take a cohort of farmers. It started with 30 the first year, 30 the next year. Now we've got 15. It's better with a small group actually. And we give them training to be influencers. So it's about messaging, media training. We talk about like different ways of thinking and leading, and we did personality tests with them and how it is to work with different types of people, creating a vision like together. Like it was really, when we did it all online this year in March, just a lot of Zoom time, but it was incredible the level of like leadership training discussion that they had. And we could see that we really, like all the farmers just really, really cared about improving soil health and water quality. And it was just really inspiring to work with them. So we teach them how to facilitate learning groups, how to coach their peers, but then also the personal efficacy part, like time management, goal setting, like all these types of things. So, and then we give them the opportunity as well. So this here, this ad campaign that we're running, we take their messages and put it out into Country Guide and Better Farming. We get them in front of a camera here with Real Ag, has a video series called The Soil School that looks at some of them. And ultimately we get them in small groups talking to each other. And that's kind of the way that we try to get the message across. And we also are fueling their own ideas. Networks are great, but networks can get very, networks are only intelligent if they keep having an influx of external people into the network. Else you just become an echo chamber and it doesn't go anywhere. So it's important that we build external connections. And a lot of farmers are really interested in doing research. They have research questions on their farm, but they don't have time to do the research. They don't have the know-how. And so connecting with researchers, and for any one of you, please contact me if you're interested in doing research on farm, because we sure have a lot of farmers that would love to work with researchers. And again, that's a connection that needs to get kind of facilitated. So that's all part of the soil network. Connecting with other farmers in Ontario, like if a farmer tells me, oh, I'm really interested in learning this, like I'm a social butterfly, so I know who they should talk to in Eastern Ontario, and I like make that conversation happen. So it's, again, it's fueling what kind of already would naturally happen. We do behind the scenes coordination, and I also just like bring the coffee or the beer usually, let's be honest, and cheerleading. Like that's kind of an underappreciated role of learning, is that it does take some facilitation. So yeah, I'm challenging farmers this year. We're just coming out with this idea of pods. It's 5 people, 1 topic. They meet 5 times, and they're responsible for finding out, what do we not know about this topic? And they really are the drivers of their own learning, which really almost turns like KTT and extension on its head, is that this is really demand driven. Like if a farmer wants to ask the researcher the question, instead of the researcher being like, here, I have this knowledge for you. So there may be an opportunity to work with you know, people, those of you that are researchers that have something to say to farmers, connecting you with the farmers that want to learn something. So I think there's an opportunity there to, again, you are all part of the soil network because it's a network approach. One of the great ideas born out of a pandemic that came out of this year's cohort is the Ontario Soil Online Road Trip. And this is open to, like, if any of you have a field site that's promoting soil health or demonstrating or researching, this could be a tremendous opportunity to pop it on an app. We're working with Soil and Crop and a few other organizations and conservation authorities to get videos, because most of this might have to be online depending on how the world works this summer. If it is all online, that'd be fine. It's just lots of videos of, hey, this is what planting was like and this is the conditions I planted into. This is what it looks like on July 1st, and following the farms throughout the season. But we're also going to be putting in some research sites from conservation authorities, some edge of field monitoring sites that they've done, so that they also get an equal opportunity to be on this app. It could be in real life because there'll be signs on the side of the road, but most often I imagine it'll be online. And last but not least, we're documenting our influence. So we've got Dr. Erin Nelson and Dr. Julia Baird did like a social network analysis and looking kind of at the how farmers learn aspect of it, and whether we're effective. Not only are we looking at the quantitative reach, like how many thousands of farmers are being reached, it's also the qualitative shifts of, again, like behavior change, attitudinal change. Those are very messy to understand, and but yet, and we do need researchers and social researchers to work alongside us to try to figure this out, because yeah, it's really not simple. And I absolutely love this quote, just to finish it off: if we wait for the government, it will be too late. if we act as individuals, it will be too little, but if we act as communities, it might just be enough. And that's the idea of the soil network, is we're linking now 70 farmers that really care about soil health and water quality, and seeing what great things we could get up to if we put our minds together. But I do want to make a note that it's more than just the social aspect. Like, okay, we have great social capital, but there is still hurdles that in order to get to improved water quality, we do need to look at the corporate control of agriculture, like the cheap food policy, the research and development, that research being done in universities. Is it really to the benefit of farmers, or I don't know, big ag? Like, there's a lot of the more political and bigger systems changes that need to occur in order for this to happen. So I don't want to just say, well, farmers are the problem, farmers are the solution, and Bob's your uncle. Like, there's huge forces at play here, and we're all responsible. Like, anyone that eats, anyone that votes is responsible for soil health and water quality. So I just wanted to put this on the map too. Anyways, that's the end of my presentation, but I want to have a conversation about the soil network, but I wanted to leave my contact information here and the follow-ups for the other projects that I put on. Yeah, phew.
Thank you so much.
8 minutes? Oh no, I talk too much. Okay.
Oh. Thank you so much, Mel. I don't see any questions on the chat yet, but feel free to unmute yourself to ask questions.
Yes, please.
Okay. I'll go ahead and start. So this is really cool. I love the social network analysis and that piece of the work. So in there, so is it connecting the farmers and their practices? Are there any measurement going on with this network of farmers that you have at their locations?
Yeah, we did, like, we've done like soil testing on some farms and like worm counting and things like that. But it really begs the question is, well, what do we really want to know? Like, how would we measure success? And it is a long game. I just heard from a farmer the other day. I had challenged him back in 2017 to like invite his neighbors out and talk about cover crops. And he called it Cover Crops Gives You Wings. And he had beer and wings at his shop and had some of his neighbors come in, and they did a field tour. And he said this year, 4 years later, finally, one of those farmers is starting to use cover crops this year. So we don't measure that like in a funding cycle. Right. Like that, you know what I mean? Yeah. We had to give a report 3 years ago. And yeah, we're not going to see the results of this for 7 years. So I wish we could get 7 years of funding, but we're just always like, stop, start. So yeah.
I think Tom has a question and Pamela has a question.
Yes, Mel, this is, you know, a very integrated approach to dealing with at least, you know, the issues that impact water quality. You've got intimate connections set up here and knowledge now of farm practices. Agriculture faces a number of other very pressing issues as well. And first and foremost on my mind, just because I'm associated with the nitrogen fertilizer industry, is the greenhouse gases. So is your approach amenable to address other issues like greenhouse gases and air quality as well? And what kind of a sense do you pick up from the growers of being able to address multiple issues that might be of concern to society at large?
Mm-hmm. That's such a good question, because ultimately I think it's the same approach. It's the same different outcome, same approach. I don't know. farmers like really do care about soil carbon. A lot of people are wanting to do that specific research, is looking at are we drawing down carbon? But then there's others that don't even believe that climate change is happening, and they're all part of the soil network, right? Like, and there's a place for everyone, and no one is coming in saying, well, we're here to reduce phosphorus use, or we're here because of water quality. We're not even talking about water quality, to be honest. We're talking about what matters to a farmer, which is conserving their soil and not going broke this year, right? Like, so we need to look at the economics, the sustainability, but ultimately what matters to the farmer. And if there's other outcomes, which are improved water quality, improved air quality, carbon drawdown, that'd be great. But that's not the first thing that a farmer thinks about. Now I can see you. Hi.
You're mute now.
Yeah. Did you have a
thought? I can either see you or hear you, Tom.
I can appreciate, all I meant to say was I can appreciate that, Mel, and thanks for the response.
But that really is, and when we talk about messaging from our farmers in the soil network to talk to other farmers, yeah, we don't say climate change is real and we've got to do something about it. Like, let's start with where they're at, which is a practical aspect. Yeah. Pam?
Yeah, I was just going to say I'm very happy with the soil network is being involved in our Living Labs project, and I think there's a lot of experience with knowledge translation and transfer that we can share nationally from your guys' experience. And I think it's the whole social aspect is there. I guess where I'm wondering is where the role or with sort of farm advisors and industry, like in terms of norms, like there's sort of, you know, there's business reasons, you know, for a crop consultant to become a 4R, you know, stewardship certified person. But I mean, how much is even in that realm, I guess, of you know, private consultants, is some of these norms and some of these things, you know, are they another venue or group of pod? Like, how do they fit with your pods and small groups and things?
Yeah, the pods. I would love for advisors to be, well, and researchers and academics to be part of these pods. I would want a farmer to invite them, you know, but they wouldn't even know, like, that's why we need to kind of facilitate them. But yeah, advisors. We've always had that issue where I want there to be like a whole number of CCAs that are part of the soil network every year, but they kind of have to be independent. We're always wondering, like, are they just here to try to sell? Like, because these are deep friendships that we start building with a cohort. And if they now just got 10 new customers, like, so there's like that fine balance. If they have something to sell, we're just aware of it. Not necessarily wary, but just aware of it.
Yeah, and I mean, in some ways they're competitors, which is different than farmers themselves. Like, I was thinking just more social group of them, but maybe it's might not work the same way. Just curious what your thoughts were.
Yeah, and sometimes I think, like, if our farmers had much better training and like they were CCAs and soil network farmers, could they start getting paid for their services? Because they put a lot of time into doing, like, this is farmer extension. And I mean, extension people are getting paid, but farmers are not going to get paid so far for doing this. So yeah, there's got to be, again, it's a network and it's all coming in and everyone's a part of it. Mm-hmm.
Dorian, I thought I saw your hand up.
I do want to mention that Dorian is like one of the main reasons, the only reason that the soil network exists. And I should have put that on the first slide. Yeah.
You're very sweet, Mel. No, I disagree. I think that's on you and maybe Anne. But no, I was just curious, Mel, since you are obviously very passionate about soil, and, you know, government has so far started to, I think, recognize the importance of soil, and that Ontario, we've developed a soil strategy and are implementing it. Now there's a bill for the federal government about having a national soil strategy. But I'm curious if some of the other types of what you could call environmental agriculture might be coming forward as maybe a different unifying voice or theme for ag, like regenerative agriculture or climate smart agriculture. Like, do you feel like, you know, one is starting to resonate more with farmers?
Yeah. Oh, that's a good question. Like, if I understand the question correctly, it's kind of like, what do we call this?
So it's most well received.
Yeah. For our farmers in the soil network, at least this cohort, they say regen ag, like this new buzzword. But in 2017, when we started, no one knew that word. No one was saying the word regenerative, but it has now kind of become the buzzword because sustainable is, I don't know, they didn't like it anymore. And nobody likes the word BMP. Farmers still don't know what that means. But they seem to really be gravitating to regenerative agriculture and climate friendly. And that only works for some people. But regen ag seems to be what people are going against. And the idea of that it's their principles, not prescriptions. Yeah. And thank you for the funding, Dorian, as always.
Jianlu, I see your hand up. If you wouldn't mind unmuting, yeah.
Yes. It's already 2 minutes past 10, but if you can stay for 1 more minute. So that's a very interesting survey, and but I'm kind of curious because like the Fertilizer Canada and also the Statistics Canada, they also make the surveys, like, right? Tom is here, so maybe I'm sure you know that better. So I'm just wondering, so when you make the surveys at the watershed level, so how those results, like you talked about how many, the percentage of people that are aware of 4Rs, for example, and how those results like comparable to those surveys by Fertilizer Canada or the government. Yeah, do you have any comments on that?
I wish that, like, as I designed the survey, we did look at other surveys that had been done, but we probably could have done a better job of making them comparable. Like, because definitely the way that we ask the question does dictate what the answer is, and so keeping them standardized was always a problem. But yeah, I hope that we can at least somewhat compare to the different surveys that have been done. But yeah, happy to share. Tom, we can just
on the
our numbers and see what they say.
On the broad scale, it seems your numbers are very consistent with what was found in the larger scale right across Canada. 50% of farmers have heard of 4R nutrient stewardship, and a slightly larger fraction, perhaps up to 80%, are doing it. But then that question depends on really how you define it. If you're defining it only by phosphorus practices, you'll get one answer. If you take all nutrients, you may get a different one. In the States, a number of surveys by the NRCS, when they very strictly define right for source, rate, timing, and placement, they end up with quite a few watersheds where only 3% are getting all 4 right. But sometimes those exclusions become very arbitrary. It's a very difficult thing to get so prescriptive that from a high level, you can define what one farmer on one farm is doing is right or not right. So there is a big difficulty with defining practices so precisely. And we're still wrestling with that in the industry.
No kidding. Yeah, and ultimately, I mean, I could ask farmers if they think they're doing the right thing. Like, that's not a useful question. We ask them exactly what they're doing. We know exactly their soil tests. We know exactly every single fertilizer and manure application, at what rate, at what time, at what placement. And then that was what I showed you, is just like the tiniest little bit of an iceberg. And it's so neat what we can dive through. And we'll definitely be sharing. I put Chris Welland's email there. It'll be a forthcoming report that like anyone can kind of use those average numbers to inform models.
Yep, thanks.
Excellent.
Thank you. I probably didn't answer any questions. I just
how soon will that report be available, Mel?
Oh goodness, I'm still working with his grad students. It'll be I hope it'll be in the next 2 months, but I've been saying that for the last year, so. Okay.
If there's anything you can share on those phosphorus distributions in advance of that, I'd be very interested.
Oh, yeah, no, and I'd be happy to, we can have like offline conversations, because we've always been wanting feedback on, are these numbers right? Like I sent them to agronomists. As averages, they thought, "Ooh, those seem a little high," or the organic matter too. Like, so we had to go back and look at the ranges, and they're like, "No, they're right."
Okay.
We didn't just have a problem with the math. Yeah.
Well, this was a really great conversation, and we're a little bit over, so I might wrap things up. But it's just a testament to how great your presentation was, Mel, that people just kept wanting to have a discussion, and I think we'll be able to continue this through the Lake Futures Steering Committee and perhaps other forums as well. So this does wrap up the webinar series for our steering committee. However, if any of our other members of the steering committee want to present, we're absolutely open. Or if others want to present, we're open to sharing information this way. It seems to have worked really well. So please get in touch with me, and I will follow up with folks. This presentation will be recorded and posted on our website in the next few days. So thank you very much, and I hope everyone has a wonderful day. Nandita, did you have anything else that you wanted to add?
No, thank you so much, Nancy, for organizing, and Mel for the talk, and everyone for attending. Really enjoyed learning about all the work. I love, this is one of the positives of COVID, is that we've gotten so much used to Zoom and being able to learn so much through this process.
Yes. Thank you so much for all the questions and the conversation. And thank you, Nancy and Anita, for inviting me.
Absolutely. Okay, have a great day, everyone.
Thank you. Bye now.
Bye.